Okay, we should be live. Good job. All right. Well, we are going to just get right into it today, just like every other time. And we will start out with this question. Do I endorse any years or months for the end time of Jesus' return? So the answer would be no. Let me, because the Bible doesn't give specific months and years. Now, I think that the feast will play a role, but that doesn't tell us what year. It gives us an idea of what months. And then our job is to figure out how do those feasts play into future events. So there's no specific dates of years, but the feast will play some type of role. Okay. I don't need to elaborate anymore. You've seen people setting dates and everything like that. Now, how about this question? Is a timeline for the end times setting dates? No. Let me show you the difference. All right, let us take a look at this. This is a timeline that has specific dates, and you may have seen ones out there like this. So you have, like 1844. There's these dates that are going on here. Let me remove that. These things, they have the sixth seal. These are the dates, and these are the plagues and the seven trumpets. And they took the dates out here, but they have all of these dates, all these times here that are setting these dates of when they were going to happen. Now, these dates here, 1843, 1844, these timelines have been modified because if you go back and study eschatology in the 19th century, in the 1844s, there was this big movement of the rapture was going to happen here. The rapture was going to happen in 1844 because of timelines like this, right? Because this is when the 1335 years were ended. Well, and then that's why they call this here the Great Disappointment, because they thought that that's when the rapture was going to happen. That's example of date setting. Now then they've changed the timeline, they've changed it, and they've taken out all these future times. But you can still see they keep these 1335 years, the 1290 years, because those were the dates that they had assigned to those years. And what I'm doing today is not like that. What I'm going to be looking at is more of a timeline, something like this. Now, this is not the timeline that I'm doing. You've seen this one many different times, but this is not that timeline. But it's something like that, right? This is one event, then this event happens, then this event happens, then this event. It's not a year, it's a chronology of events. So that's the difference between setting dates and organizing a timeline. So how is a timeline different than setting dates? Exactly what I said. Dates are something when something will happen specifically. A timeline is when the order of events. So I go to Disney World and I'm going to go on this ride, then this ride, then this ride. But I'm not saying, oh, I'm going to go on this ride at 8 o'clock and this ride at 8:30 and then this ride at 9 o'clock. Right. So when we try to set dates or do timelines, we can make a couple of different mistakes. One mistake we can make is we set a date for a specific year. We say, oh, it's going to happen on this year. And you can see time after time the prediction failures because people say, oh, this is what I'm watching for, this date. But that's not what the Bible says. He says to be looking for these events, right? These are the events that you should be looking for, not the dates that you should be looking for. So the second problem that people can make is that they watch for the wrong events. So you see this very frequently, people that are watching for the events of the pre-tribulation rapture. This is the event that I'm looking for, but it's the wrong event because we see multiple times that Jesus says to look for something called the abomination of desolation. Paul talks about in Second Thessalonians, we're watching or looking for the man of lawlessness before the return of Christ and the gathering. So there's certain things that we need to be watching for. We need to watch for events and we need to watch for the correct events. All right. So Then we have to ask the question, make sure I have that. Yeah. All right. Does the Bible suggest a timeline? So this is why people get into trouble kind of per se. We get into trouble because yes, the Bible suggests a timeline, an order of events. If you look at the book of Revelation, you see these events that seem to have some type of order. And our job is to correctly place the order of events in the correct chronology. Doesn't mean we're placing a year, but we're placing the order of events. The second place that we see an order of events is in Matthew, in Jesus's words. Now, this is probably where the most important order of events occur. So, if we were to look at this order of events, let's take a look. As you know, I like Bible. Bible is good. You will see that over here, you see this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony of the nations, and then the end will come. Right. So, all of these things that happened before, all these different events happened before. And then the correct event that we're looking for is therefore when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place. So that's the event. That's the event that we're looking for. So if we were looking at this event, we find out that abomination, the end comes, then we get the abomination. So we get a point in time. We get the abomination of desolation is a point. And I've done numerous videos about what the abomination of desolation is. Was it in 70 AD? Is it a future event? You can go back and look at those. That's not what we're doing here. We're trying to set up the chronology of events. All right, so this is what we're attempting to do. So the next part of it is it tells you, Jesus is telling you specifically, go look in Daniel. And in Daniel, you will find three different time periods where the abomination of desolation is mentioned. We find that in Daniel 9, we find it in Daniel 8, and we find it in Daniel 11 and 12. So we find the abomination of desolation mentioned in those four different locations. Now the question is does is there a chronology there? Is there a timeline mentioned there? And what we find is yes, there is a timeline mentioned in that location. So let's take a look at this timeline. So we get the abomination, then comes the end. We get this point in time. So we go over to Daniel 9:27, and we find that and we have to figure out who he is. And again, numerous videos, go back and look at those. He will make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. That's 7-year time period. Okay, straightforward. But where's the abomination, colon? But in the middle of the week, he will cease sacrifices. Okay, well, I'm still not seeing the abomination. So there's a 7-year covenant. So we get what looks like this. We get the sacrifices that cease in the middle, and the abomination of desolation either occurs here or it occurs here. Well, how do we know that? How do we get that information? Because of the next part of the verse. The next part of the verse is and on the wing of the desolating abominations. Now, the first thing I want you to recognize is on the wing of the desolating abominations. So, number one, the abominations here is plural. So, it actually mentions multiple. So, there's actually a multiple desolating abominations until the complete destruction that is decreed is poured out on the desolator. Now, the other thing that really hit me is this word poured out, this idea of bowls, wrath, this idea of being poured out on the desolator. But this highlights this timeline here, this order of events, right? We have the wing of abomination. So we either have the abomination of desolation happening when the sacrifices cease or at the end. It could be either one because it tells us just it's on the wing of desolating abominations. It could be both. The sacrifices ceasing could be a type of abomination, right? But there could be another type of a desolating abomination that occurs as well. What do we know from Second Thessalonians 2? It says that the man of lawlessness will stand in the holy place saying that he declaring himself to be God. Well, that's a type of desolating abomination as well. So could it be both? Could it be one? Well, what else do we find? We get more information. If we go to the next place, we go into Daniel 12:11. There we find, and from the time the regular burnt offering is taken away, and to or until the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1900 days. Well, the really interesting thing about that translation is that this word to or until is not translated in the original Hebrew into English, that they leave that word out. But that phrase is actually found 8 times in the Bible, and it's always translated with the and to or and until, and the next word is set up or placed. So it should actually read, and from the time the regular burnt offering is taken away, and to the setting up of the abomination of desolation, there will be 1290 days. What does that tell us? It tells us or suggests that the actually between the sacrifices ending and the abomination is 1290 days. Now, some people get that correct. Some people have correctly identified that, and I've seen a couple of people teach on that. But most people say the abomination will happen at the second time when the sacrifices cease. Now, because the word wing of desolating abominations is plural, that could be defined as an abomination of desolation. But the one that Daniel is really speaking of is 1290 days separated from when the sacrifices end. So that's one thing we need to make sure that we're getting our order of events correct. You could still put an abomination of desolation here, but because of the way Daniel 12:11 translates it, or poorly translated, it is actually at the end of the 7-year mark that the person is going to stand up, or what I suspect that person will do and stand up. I got some comments. Let's take a look here. One said rapture will take place soon, probably 2025. You're right. The rapture will take place soon, 2025. Probably not. So I'm, you know what? We'll prayerfully watch, but I don't think that the pre-trib rapture is an accurate distillation understanding of biblical truths. All right, so we're still on this question of, does the Bible suggest a timeline of the end, an order of events? That's what we are going through, this order of events. So next, we get this other part. We also find, let us change this to that. Slide over there. Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1335 days. So in Daniel 12:12, we get this blessed. So now that we have to get this next 1335 days, we have to ask the next question. Does the 1335 days overlap? You can see that here, right? The 75 days are added on to the end of 1290 days, or is the 1335 days after the abomination of desolation? Well, the interesting thing is that 1335 days doesn't give us, it doesn't say what the start point is. It says blessed the person who gets to the end, but the start point is left for us to interpret. So if the abomination of desolation is at 1290 days, if you were to read something and you were to read, this is the order of event, the sacrifices cease, then 1290 days is the abomination of desolation, and then I would tell you, blessed is the one that waits the 1335 days, you could say that, well, the sacrifices ceasing is the first point for 1335 days, which means the 1290 is overlapped with the 1335. And I've seen some people talk about that. They think that, once the abomination set up, there'll be 75 days and then Jesus' return. Okay. But what if the 1335 days is from the end of the abomination of desolation? I mean, that is the track I'm going to take. That is the way I'm going to approach this, and I'm going to show you why I chose that. Because the order of events fit better with that type of scenario. If you take the Bible at its face and natural reading, I think that's what it's trying to say. But it's not clear. And if you want to make the case that it's overlapping, I don't think you could. It's a completely semantic interpretation. I think you could make a good case for either one, but I'm going to take the case that the all the things that happen after the abomination in Matthew 24:15, from 16 to 31, the great tribulation, the sixth seal, the bowl, trumpet and bowl junctions, Jesus' return, is not going to happen in just 75 days. I think it's going to be longer. I think it's going to be that whole 1335 days. And I'm going to show you that timeline, and I'm going to show you why that fits in with Daniel 8. Okay. And if you took this course, you could still fit it in with Daniel 8, but you have to make a different adjustment, and we'll talk about that. So that now, the next question is, um, why might Daniel 12:11 been poorly translated to obscure the 1290 days? I'm not sure why that might be the case. Why was it poorly translated? Like I mentioned before, that phrase, it's vele nantan, which means and to give, or and to place, or and to set up. It's this phrase, and it's used, like I said, 8 times. 6 out of the 8 times, it's translated in the Bible, in our Bibles, as and to give, right? The one time, there's the 7th time, some translations translate it and to give, but other ones translate it and giving, right? And they don't put the two. But that's about a 50-50 split. But pretty much universally, the other 6 locations, it's translated and to give, or and to place. They put the word to in there. Is it because some people are preterists and they want the sacrifice being taken away and the abomination that would have happened at the same time back in 70 AD, so that it makes sense there? Maybe because they want it to fit in that 7-year time frame. And so if they put them both at the same time in the middle, everything fits into that nice 7-year compact. I don't know. I don't know why it was poorly translated that way. Um, but I have talked to at least one uh, Hebrew scholar who says, yeah, you could put that two back in there. And a lot of times they will take out these prepositions or these little words like uh, to fit better with what they think is the flow. And I think it actually makes things worse. So I can't say why. Could it be some conspiracy? Well, let's take a look at what might happen if we talked about this, if it was concurrent or not. So that was this part here. Is the 1335 days concurrent with the 1290, or is it after? So, but here's the real thing I want to talk about, which is, why could a misunderstanding of the 1290 and the 1335 days be harmful for Christians? Well, let us say that, let me switch this over here. Boom. And get rid of this. Let's say that we expect Jesus to return at the end of this 7 years, or we expect him to return at the end of the 1290 days, or we expect him to return at the end of 1335 days. But in reality, the abomination of desolation is occurring here. Well, what might the person who's setting up the abomination of desolation, who stands in the holy place, who says, I am God and I expect you to worship God, he elevates himself over God. Well, we also know that there's also going to be a false prophet. So one of those two is most likely going to be saying, I'm Jesus. Believe in me because I'm Jesus. No, I'm not Jesus, but that false prophet, the antichrist could be saying that. And if we're expecting Jesus to return here at the end of this time, and all of a sudden, Jesus isn't coming back the way we thought. We don't see him on the clouds, but this person's showing signs and wonders. And they're saying, no, I'm telling you, I'm Jesus. You expect him to return at this time, but he's not come back yet because I'm Jesus. And he keeps telling you that. And you get to the end of this 30 days and nothing's, you don't haven't seen anybody come on the clouds, and you haven't seen Jesus come on the clouds, and the rapture hasn't happened yet. And people start to go, well, maybe he is. And then the 75 days pass, and people are like, well, maybe he is. The rapture hasn't happened. We're still here. The resurrection hasn't happened. Oh my goodness, well, he's showing signs and wonders. Maybe he is. Well, what's one of the things it talks about in Second Thessalonians 2? It says the apostasy must come first, and the man of lawlessness must be revealed. Maybe this is setting up for a huge end times deception. So what we need to know is we need to know, how is Jesus actually returning? And we need to know, what is that timeline of the end? What is the order of events? And if we get these order of events wrong, we could be set up for mass deception, mass disillusionment. And we're like, you must be Jesus because we were expecting you to come back this time. It's been 2000 years. What if this person shows up in 2032, 2033, and we're like, well, it's almost 2000 years, Jesus should be treated. And now he comes back and says, I am Jesus. And none of these other things are fitting. This misunderstanding the 1290 and the 1335 days could be setting people up for a mass delusion, apostasy, misunderstanding if they don't have a biblical understanding of the order of events, which is why I honestly think the 1335 days is after the 1290 days. That's why it could be super, super harmful to Christians. Now, excuse me. So these are those extra scripture verses that I talked about in Second Thessalonians 2. That day will not come, the day of Christ's return, the day of the gathering, unless the man of lawlessness is revealed, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. The coming lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all the power and false signs and wonders, because they refuse to love the truth and to be saved. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion so that they may believe what is false. We need to know what the return of Jesus is going to look like. This is paramount. What is that return going to look like? Is it going to be something that all of a sudden just a whole bunch of people disappear and no one actually saw Jesus? Or is Jesus going to return in the clouds and every eye will see him? Right? This is the thing that could set people up for a really false understanding. Now, this expected Jesus return could actually be the false prophet. You see, I have that down here, that we expect Jesus to return this way, but maybe it's actually the false prophet or the antichrist who's saying, I'm Jesus. Now, what if the time of the end is 10 years and not 7? What if that's actually the case? What if we're expecting him to come back at the end of 7 years, but the tribulation time is actually 10 years? Again, mass deception. So, what I ask you, um, and I ask other people, prove me wrong. Where does the Bible ever say that the tribulation is 7 years? It never said the covenant is 7 years, but there's nowhere else in the Bible. And I've done the searches. It's hard to prove something that's not there. It's hard for me to say, there's no, because you search 7 and years, and you don't find anything about the tribulation. You can make speculations about the 7 years of plenty, like in Egypt, and the 7 years of famine. Well, that's still 14 years. So you can make these analogies, but to actually say this is 7 years, it's not there. You can't find the association that maybe it's, oh, there's a reference to 7 days, and 7 days is like a year, so it's 7 years. You can't find that either. But you know what's really interesting? Um, what's interesting is it tells us in John, it says, in this world, you will have tribulation. We talked about this on the previous live stream, that the wrath and tribulation are different. You will have tribulation in this world, but take heart, I have overcome the world. It also talks about how John, in the beginning of the book of Revelation, says, I, your fellow bondservant John, your fellow in the tribulation. Right? So we're going to have this tribulation. But the other really interesting thing that most people wind up missing is that in Revelation 2:10, the only place that tribulation in a time frame is put together is in Revelation 2:10, where we see this. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Okay? You're about to suffer something. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Interesting. So what are you saying, Kalan? Well, what I'm saying is, if we want to take the association of days being years, right? 1 day equals 1 year. This is the only place that maybe makes that hint that the tribulation time period is actually 10 years or 10 days. It could have said 7, but it said 10. Okay. Well, is there another place that tribulation in 7 years or 7 days is put together? Again, no, I can't show you that Bible verse because it's not there. You can't show something in the Bible unless I'm going to scribble in something. No, I'm not doing that. So the interesting thing is the only place that tribulations associate with a time frame is actually in the book of Revelation, where it says 10 days. And how long is 1260, 1290, and 1335 days? It's 10.6 years. Okay, so if you actually go back and look and calculate it, it's 10.6 years. And people say, well, if you round that, it's 11. Okay, could be. Yeah, you could round it up to 11, but you couldn't say 11 days because it's not full 11 years. It's still 10 years and a half. And there could be a reason why it's only 10 and a half years, because maybe it's cut short. Again, speculation. That's completely speculation. All I'm trying to say is, does the Bible ever say the tribulation is 7 years? No. That's all that I'm trying to say there. Could I do I think that association of 10 days makes sense? Yeah, I think it plays into what I'm talking about, but we have to be careful not to go beyond what the Bible is teaching. And this 1335 days, whether it's overlapping with the 1290 or after it, again, that is, you're going to have to come to a decision for that, because the Bible is not explicitly clear which one is the beginning point. Is the beginning point the sacrifices ceasing, or the 1290 days, the abomination? I'm going to take the view that it's of the 1335 days is after the abomination, which is a completely minority view. There is almost no one that says that. I've watched so many different Bible teachers. I found a couple that say this, but no one tells us this. No one says that it could be almost 10 years. So, but I think that could be accurate because that could set us up for significant deception. All right, so now what we've come for, what we really want, we want a simplified timeline. That's what we want to see. So our simplified timeline is this. This is our simplified timeline that we have 12, that we have the covenant in the middle, the sacrifices cease. At the end of the 7 years, the abomination of desolation, where that person stands in the holy place. Remember, the sacrifices ceasing could be an abomination. But what we're talking about is the one where he stands in the holy place and declares himself, I am God. That he stands up and says, and he exalts himself above every God. And then there's 1335 days. And at the end of that 1335 days, or during that time frame, everything from Matthew 24, 16 to 31 happens. And the great tribulation, the sixth seal, the trumpets and bowls, Jesus's return. That all happens after the abomination of desolation in that 1335, which means there's a slow run up. Now, the question is what is the covenant? What is that covenant with many that somebody's going to make? Who's going to make it? He, the one, the prince of the people of the prince who is to come, who overthrew Jerusalem, okay, that destroyed it. Who is he? Is that the Antichrist? Is that somebody else? And who's the many? The Bible doesn't tell us this covenant. And if we say it's Israel, well, it doesn't say it's a covenant with many. We think it'll be Israel. They think they'll be involved in it. But who has to make it? Israel has made many covenants. They've made many peace agreements. We don't know what that's going to be. We're going to really struggle to identify when that covenant happens. Some people have said that covenant's already started. I watched one channel who said, yeah, that covenant started last year, the covenant with the many. I'm a little hesitant. We don't know because we have to wait until the middle where the sacrifices cease. And then we might be there, or maybe the sacrifices cease and then they restart. And then another covenant is made. We don't know. There could be a false start and stop. We don't know. The where we're going to know and what we have to watch for is this abomination of desolation. We have to watch for that man of lawlessness that stands in the holy place. Now, I'm still doing some research, but I found a channel of somebody who has calculated the 666 and has run some different people's names through the what's called the Greek isopsephy. It's taking somebody's name, putting it into Greek, and running it through a calculator, and it's come up with a couple of names that might fit. That's really interesting. They haven't hit any of the other. They've hit a few of the events or the few of the characteristics that we need to be looking for, but still, it's still very early. We can't stand up and say, oh yeah, this is the person, right? Because some of these events have not happened yet. So we have to be very careful. We don't want to be that person who runs out and says, this is it, this is it, this is it, only to be completely proven wrong. We're watching, we're waiting, we're patient, and it's a challenge. We just want it to be done with. We want to be, but we also want to be right. We don't want to put something false into God's mouth. We don't want to be a Christian who is doing a disservice or a dishonor to our Lord and Savior. And so we speculate, we come up with plans and ideas, and I want to bring this up to the Christian community, and I want them to test all these things. I want them to go through and look at this, and I've been trying to get this idea out there that maybe it's longer, and because of some of these translational issues. So this is a simplified timeline. Now, we also realize that the book of Revelation has a timeline associated as well. So let us take a look and ask this question: how is the book of Revelation structured? How is the book of Revelation structured? Now, if we take a look here, I'll get rid of mine and get rid of this. There's two primary views or two primary ways that people have thought the book of Revelation is structured, and I call them the linear view and the concurrent view. The linear view is the seals happen, all 1 through 7, the trumpets happen, all 1 through 7, and then the bowls happen. The concurrent view is some form of overlap where all seal 1, trumpet 1, bowl 1 happen at the same time. Seal 2, trumpet 2, bowl 2 happen at the same time. But there's some type of overlap of either all the seals, trumpets, and bowls, or the seals happen, then the trumpets and bowls completely overlap the two of them. Well, the reason that people have had to come up with the concurrent view is basically saying, well, there's a lot of things in the trumpets that look exactly like what happens in the bowls, or very, very similar. And I'm not going to go through all of those things that look very similar. Because there's a structural, we have to look for, when we look for a timeline, when we look for an order of events, right? We're looking for, before this happens, this happens. After this happens, this happens. I'm doing this, then this happens, right? We're looking for those structural analysis words, the words that help us to know what are the order of events. And inside the book of Revelation, there is a couple of structure sentences that help us determine what the order of events are in the book of Revelation. So I am going to take a linear view of the book of Revelation. And why is that? Well, let's look at the two main structural issues that help us determine that. Number one is a transition between the seals and the bowls. And we find that in Revelation 8, 1 and 2. And you see that on the bottom of your screen here. And we read, and when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. Okay, so the seventh seal is opened, and now there's silence. It's telling you there's a pause. The seventh seal's open, pause. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. So it's clearly telling us, that the trumpets happen after the bowls, that they cannot be concurrent with the seals. The trumpets cannot be concurrent with the seals. 7th seal open, pause. 7 trumpets are handed out, right? So that's already telling us the seals and the trumpets are linear. But then people are like, well, some people have come up, well, the trumpets and the bowls, those are concurrent. Yeah, the seals, but there's actually a really subtle hint that the trumpets and the bowls are also linear. And this is found in Revelation 15. Boom. So we're going to go over to Revelation 15. What we find here is we're going to go to Revelation 15:5. After these things, I looked, and the temple of the tabernacle and testimony in heaven was open. So we are up in here, right? We're up in this area. This is after the 7th trumpet has been blown. After the 7th trumpet is blown, we get the temple of the tabernacle of testimony is open. Good, clear, opened. Then we get down into verse 8. And the temple was filled with the smoke of the glory of God and from his power. Amen. How many of us want to see this? Where we tremble, we're scared, excited, all at the same time, right? But look, no one was able to enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished. Wait a second here. Let's again walk through this. The temple was opened. The 4 living creatures in verse 7 gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. So the temple's open, out walks these 4 living creatures, give 7 bowls, and then we find that the temple was shut and no one can enter until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished, which means that the bowls can't overlap with the trumpets, right? If we go back here and we see that this seventh trumpet has been finished, it's been blown, all seven, but the bowls, no one can enter. Well, maybe that was just the first time. Maybe the temple was opened just after the seventh trumpet. It was open for a really short period of time, and so maybe what they're telling you is that it was opened, and then the bowl. So the bowls happened all the time, and the temple was open here right at the end of the seventh trumpet. Right, the temple's open, but we have a problem with that. We have Revelation 11:19. In Revelation 11:19, we find that, and the temple of God, which is in heaven, was opened, and his ark of his covenant appeared in his temple. And there were flashes of lightning and peals of thunder, and a great earthquake and a hailstorm. So this is at the beginning. The seventh trumpet was just blown, right? So the temple was open just after the seventh trumpet was blown. So right here, after it was blown, and so all of these events happened, and then it was closed, and then the bowls were given. If you really think about this timeline and order of events, you realize that the view has to be linear, that the seals, then the trumpets, then the bowls. This concurrent view is not correct. Why is this important? Because Revelation ties into what Jesus says in a very key point. And that's what we're going to look at next. What we want to know is not only how the book of Revelation is structured, which is what we just looked at, but how does the Revelation timeline connect to the timeline of Jesus and Daniel, right? So Jesus and Daniel, we have this. This is the timeline we get here. But how does that connect with Revelation? So we're going to look at that here. This is how the timelines connect. And Jesus, without Jesus speaking in Matthew 24, we would not understand how the timelines connected, because Jesus helps us to connect it. If we read Matthew 24, 4 through 14, we get all of those. There'll be wars and rumors of war, and the love of many will go cold, and there'll be famines and plagues and everything like that. And then then comes the end. When you see the abomination of desolation, right? So that connects here at 1290 between the 1335 days. But we also get after Matthew 24, 15, after that abomination of desolation, we get something called the sixth seal. Now, in the sixth seal, let's take a look at these two scripture verses. All right, so we are going to look at you, and I'm going to put me over here. All right, what we get immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heaven will be shaken. Matthew 24, 29. This is what we see as the sixth seal. Let's take a look at Revelation 6, 12 through 13. And I looked when he broke the sixth seal. Okay. Why didn't you highlight? Let's get you highlighted. Boom. All right. There was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair. The whole moon became like blood. The stars of the sky fell to the earth. So we get these sayings that sound exactly like what's going on when Jesus says that in Matthew 24, 29. So what that means is, I'll remove you and add you. The sixth seal of Revelation connects to Jesus's timeline after the abomination of desolation. So what we get, if we didn't have what Jesus said, we would not be able to connect these things on a proper timeline, a proper order of events, right? We would see all the things that it talks about in the sixth seal, but there's nowhere in the book of Revelation that says anything about an abomination of desolation. It doesn't say that the beast or the false prophet stood up in the holy place and proclaimed themselves to be God in the book of Revelation. You can't find it. You see some hints of maybe these things have happened, but where did they happen? At what time period did they happen? But because of Jesus's words, we can now start to put them into an order of events which structures Daniel, Jesus, and the book of Revelation. This is huge. So, what we find is that because of this, most of the events, the first 4 to 5 seals, are going to be over a 7-year period. But that makes sense. I mean, if you go back and you read what Jesus has been talking about, what he talked about in Matthew 24, 4 through 14, right? Let's read what that says, what he says. Uh, he tells us, look, see that no one misleads you. Many will come in my name saying, I'm the Christ, and will mislead many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not frightened. Those things must take place. Wars are frightening, but this is not yet the end. He tells us, look, it's not yet the end. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, various places, famines and earthquakes. But all these things are the beginning of birth pains. They will deliver you to tribulation. They will kill you, and you'll be hated by all nations because of my name. So there's tribulation in that beginning part. Many times will fall away, and they'll betray one another and hate one another. Many false prophets will arise and mislead many. The lawlessness is increased. People's love will grow cold. Absolutely. When lawlessness is increased, we don't like each other. We're fearful of neighbors, and we don't love one another. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. The gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to the nations, and then the end will come. Right? He told us before, it's not the end yet, but now, then the end will come. So when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, so all that stuff happened in Matthew 4, 4 through 14, which is why for the last 2,000 years, people are always like, well, could it be now? Could it be now? Because we're always seeing wars and rumors of wars and famines and plagues and pestilence and people loving one another and hating one another and betraying one another. We've seen it for 2,000 years. So the first part of the 4 seals, it may be something much more ramped up than what we expect. It might be something a lot more than what we normally expect. But that's why we've always wondered it. And if it happens for the first 7 years, we're going to be like, it's nothing different than what we've already seen, just on steroids. It's like COVID on steroids. You can finally say COVID on a live stream and not be shut down. Hope my stream will still be going, right? Um, but it's just going to be what we've always kind of seen until we get to this abomination of desolation. And then all of a sudden people go, whoa, that's something a little different that we haven't seen before. And then the end will come. Then we get the 6th seal after it. So it helps us to lock in what the order of events are in the book of Revelation and what we should be expecting. So when that covenant is made, we have almost 7 years of tribulation, of wars and famines and plagues, and that's what we see in the first 4 seals. The first 4 seals is peace through strength, right? We see war, then we see plagues and famine, and then we see death. The rider on the black horse, death. That is scary times. Are we prepared for it? Are we ready for it? People don't want to hear it. It's not something pleasant to talk about. But we need to be prepared, and we need to be somebody who has our eyes wide open. We need to look at what the Bible actually says. So, this is how this connects, but we have more, right? So now the next question is what should we be watching for? What should we be watching for regarding the end times? So, do we watch for a covenant? Sure, we can watch for a covenant, but we don't know which one. We can watch for these seals. We can watch for peace. That's why people there's a what's called a historical perspective, and many people that I've watched, including a really recent channel that was talking about the Antichrist, thinks that the first 4 and 5 seals have already been opened. Okay, that's fine. You could say that they've been open for 2,000 years, which which is fine because when you see that abomination of desolation, that's when it really kicks off, which is probably about the 5th seal. So what we're really looking for is the 6th seal, but before that is the abomination. So we could be looking for sacrifices, right? At the end of the 1260 days, we could be looking for sacrifices. That would be something, sacrifices ceasing or ending. Well, to see them end, they have to begin. So we have to look for them starting. So that's something that we can look for. But again, I told you that that could be a false flag. It could start and then stop and then start and then stop. So even though it's somewhat helpful and we're watching, it's not something like, oh yeah, here it is, boom. The key, and that's why Jesus says, now comes the end, is this abomination. That's what we have to recognize. That's what we have to know. By the 6th seal, we're going to be full blown into this great tribulation. And if we're waiting for the 6th seal, we're going to probably be in a little bit of hurt. So we watch, we wait, we wonder, but we don't make a prophetic announcement. We don't make an announcement. The Bible says until we see this abomination, until we see that person stand up. But maybe there's some clues that we can look at ahead of time. What are those clues? Well, one of those clues is the mark of the beast, or the name of the Antichrist, which is in 666 in Greek, isophexy, which is basically how to calculate it. And so there's some again really interesting things. I'm doing more research on that, but maybe we can recognize something a little bit before. So we're watching, we're keeping our eyes open, we're trying to stay awake without being too, the sky is falling until the sky actually falls, right? We don't want to say it too early. We don't want to be Chicken Little before it actually happens, because at some point it's going to happen, right? The end times haven't mattered for the last 2,000 years for the most part. And I've told some people in our small group, it doesn't matter until it matters. When it really matters, we need to be aware and awake. If we just say, oh, it's been 2,000 years, none of this stuff, it's already happened, and we don't have our eyes open and we're not watching. Uh, so that's hopefully why some of you watch this channel, because that's one of the things I've been trying to do is watch. But I don't want to be, I'm not trying to scare people. I'm not trying to say that this is going to happen, but immediately, could it happen in my generation? Yeah, I see a lot of signs, but maybe it'll just kind of continue like it has for another 50, 60, 100 years. These are things we're watching for. All right. So I've wondered sometimes, though, whether the first seal has opened. There's some things that happened last year that make me wonder. But again, it's not completely clear. So now the next part is, so we have this basic timeline of that we have here now and how they've connected. Now people want to know is, when is Jesus returning, right? And so we've seen this where people say Jesus is going to return in a pre-trib rapture, take his people, and then he's going to return at the end, right? He's coming down, going up, coming back down. Pretty much everybody universally agrees that in Revelation 19, you see Jesus riding on the white horse, the word of God coming down from heaven, and he has his horse and his sword. But there's some really interesting things. Number one, and I've mentioned this before, when Jesus comes in Revelation 19, he already has blood on his garment. Why does Jesus already have blood on his garment? because Jesus has already been on the earth. And you can see this reference in back in Isaiah 63, I think it is. It says, "Who is this that comes from Basra with stained raiments?" And you can read through that. Jesus comes before Revelation 19. So, what is this basic timeline? What is the simplest basic timeline for Jesus's return? Here's how I have this aligned. In Revelation 10, you see this strong angel come down. And I did a whole series on this. I think it's 5 or 6 lessons on why this is Jesus. He comes on a cloud. He has a rainbow over his head, his legs and his feet. He touches the ground. He has the scroll that's open, that's given to John. We know who opened the scroll. There's all of these things that tell us that this is Jesus, which means that if that's Jesus, he comes before the seventh trumpet is blown and after the sixth trumpet, which makes sense because if we look at First Thessalonians 4, we find that when Jesus descends, the Lord will descend with heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God. Right? So he has the voice of an archangel when he comes down. Why does he have the voice of an archangel? Because he is the Lord of hosts, right? He is the one that leads angel armies. There's that great song, something angel armies. I have it kind of in my head, but he's the Lord of hosts, and he leads angels. And so he's coming down when angel trumpets are being blown. It's the announcement of his arrival. So this is the simplest time frame, which means that the resurrection and rapture happen after he returns. And you see this, these pictures of the resurrection and rapture, harvest, this gathering in the days of the seventh trumpet. So this is the simplest structure of what we see. I mean, you have to go watch my other videos to really understand why I think that that's Jesus. But that's the simplest timeline there. But do we have an idea of how long that will be? How long do we, so here's, let me give you some thoughts here. Let's say that Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, in the fall, which is on the first day of the seventh month. Does that mean that Jesus has to return on that day, or could he return a day or two before? Could he come in the day before and then the trumpet gets blown and announced on that day and the people get to come up the mountain? Sure. Could he come at midnight? Yeah. Could he come at, we don't know exactly, and we don't know exactly the day. So I'm not saying that he's coming on Yom Teruah. All I'm saying is he's coming sometime right around this, before the seventh trumpet and after the sixth, sometime there. He could come in the summer. He could come a month or two beforehand. It's not completely clear. So our question always is why does no one know the day and hour of Jesus' return? And that's kind of what I touched on. No one knows exactly when Yom Teruah is, that first day, because of the moon. We don't know what hour it will be. We don't know if it'll be in the middle of the night, early in the morning. We don't know exactly which day that'll be. We don't know God's calendar, as we've seen with this pre-trib rapture stuff. People are like, well, it's the 23rd and 24th. Well, no, actually the day is the 3rd and the 5th and 6th of October. So it's all these things. But if you try to go and study the calendar, try to actually figure out what God's original calendar is, you're going to get, I don't know, I've seen 8 different calendars, 7, 8 different calendars. I mean, so many different calendars out there. We don't know anymore. It's like the way I said with the Jubilee. We don't know when it is because it's been so obscured, so messed up. We have no clue exactly what day that will be. So we don't know the year and we don't know the day. And we certainly don't know the hour. There's 24 hours in the day. So we don't know the day and we don't know what hour in the day it'll be. That's why Jesus's words are accurate. Even if we say that it was Yom Teruah, we don't know exactly when Yom Teruah was. I watched this year, and I think I saw 4 different dates of people celebrating Yom Teruah. I saw one person celebrating in like August, like one group of people, August. I saw 3 different times in September. Well, yeah, 2 different times in September and one time in October. I mean, it's crazy. It really is. We don't know. But what we're not doing is we're not setting dates. We're not saying it's going to happen this time. What we're doing is we're setting an order of events. We're putting together a timeline of order of events. So we know what to expect and what we should be watching for next. That's what we're doing here. All right. Now, here is one of the key things. What we want to know is, how does the 2300 days fit into the end times timeline? All right. This is a fun one. All right. Now, if we go back, this is what I have. Why do I have that? Let us go and look at Daniel 8. I didn't save this, so I'm just going to type this in. Daniel 8:13. All right. So what I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the particular one who was speaking, "How long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply?" So that's number 1. While the transgression that causes horror, okay, so it was allow the holy place to be trampled. All right, so now we have 3 things here. We have the vision of the regular sacrifice, so that's being taken away. So that's our beginning point. We have a transgression that causes horror. That could be the sacrifice taken away, plus the person that stands up in the temple proclaiming to be God. To allow the holy place and the host, this is really important. The host is also being trampled here. Not only the holy place, but the host. And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings. If you get a translation that says 2,300 days, you need to read it. You need to really be concerned about your translation, because the literal translation is evenings and mornings. This is specifically referring to the daily sacrifice. This is what it's hinting at. 2,300 evenings and mornings means that the sacrifice will be abolished for that number of days. And says, then the holy place will be properly restored. So we have to ask here, what is the holy place? We have 2 options for the holy place, right? It is either the temple in heaven or the one on the ground, the one on Jerusalem, right? It's one or the other, or both. I mean, it could potentially be both. But let me ask you this. Why is the host being trampled? Why is the host of heaven being trampled? And who asked this question? It wasn't Daniel who asked this question. It was one of the angels who asked this question. They want to know, because if we go back up and we look, right, what is happening? Look, in verse 11, I'll go to verse 10. It grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth, right? Some of the host and some of the stars fell to the earth during this time. So the holy place in heaven is being trampled. What do we see in the trumpets? We see a star falling from heaven. That star that fell from heaven gets keys that unlock the abyss. So a star gets keys, which means the star is in reference to the angel. An angel falls, gets keys, unlocks the abyss. So some of the host of heavens, this small horn, and it tramples down the host of heaven. It magnifies itself, this boastful horn, as equal to the commander of the host. Who's the commander of the host? We know that's Christ, right? We know that that's the Messiah. And it removed the regular sacrifice from him. Wait a second. And in place of his sanctuary was thrown down. Is there something going on in the heavenly places? Look, and then on account of the transgression, the host will be given over to the horn, along with the regular sacrifice. This is all talking about the host of heaven. The 2300 days is consistently talking about what's going on in the heavenly realm. There's something going on up there that may or may not be associated with the sacrifice being taken away on earth. It's not completely, it's mind-boggling and overwhelming. But let's say, for example, let's say that we associate it with the sacrifice being removed on earth, right? That's what it suggests, and the desolating abomination. So somehow this sacrifice on earth is somehow tied into what's going on up in heaven. That during when this is taken away, the host is thrown down and trampled. And then the host, one of the angels, asked, when will the holy place be restored? If we count the full 2300 evenings and mornings, we come out to a time frame which is about exactly a year from the end of the 1335 days. Why is that? I did a whole video on this. But evenings and mornings indicates the daily sacrifice. The daily sacrifice happened 365 days a year. It happened every day of the year. If it was a leap year, if there was a 366 day, it would happen on that day. Whereas the calendar that we get with the 1290s, the 1260, and the 1335 days, most likely is a 364 day calendar where each month is 30 days. That's probably what's going on. Do we know for certain? No, we don't. Again, these are things that we're speculating on, and we're trying to put them together the best we can. But let's say that that is the case. Let's say that the sacrifices are operating on a 365 calendar, and the other normal calendar is a 30-day, 12-month calendar. In that scenario, when you take that into account, the temple would be restored in heaven when Satan is kicked out, when the accuser of the brethren is kicked out, when Michael rises up, and the holy place in heaven is cleansed, and all the rebellious angels are kicked out, and the holy place is cleansed, and when the resurrection and the gathering up of the saints to heaven for that 1 year time period, heaven would be cleansed. The holy place would be completely restored. And the idea here is the Day of Atonement. The idea of the Day of Atonement is that there's two groups, and God chooses one. Now, the two groups here might be the two groups of angels, and one is kicked out. It could be the group of angels and the resurrected saints, and the angels are kicked out. But I think that that's a picture. And if we calculate, if we assume that the 335-day blessing is the end of or the beginning of the Feast of Tabernacles, this date here, this time period here, would correspond with right around the time of Day of Atonement. It's not exact. Remember how I said things don't always fit like a perfect a day here and a day there, or a year here and a year there. They're off just a little bit. It is off just a little bit. But it checks a lot of boxes. And so if we were to lock this in and put this 2300 evenings and mornings, this would mean that there would be a year after this from Sukkot to Sukkot. The, right? What happens when somebody gets married in the Old Testament? They were exempt for war for 1 year. When somebody got married, they didn't have to go to war for 1 year. And so, if the saints are brought up to heaven and they, in a sense, are getting married to Christ, they would be exempt. But Jesus would then be on the ground because Jesus has returned, and he would be fighting the battles for a year all by himself. Right? There was no one with me that was fighting that we see in Isaiah 63. If this structure holds, I think the 2300 evenings and mornings is one of the more challenging ones, but it would really lock in this um, timeline. It would really lock in the order of events. Um, I don't know. I really like that order of events, but even without that, we still get an accurate order of events. The only difference is we don't know how long or where within the 1335 days all of these events occur. But with the 2300 evenings and mornings, we would know when this would occur. That would mean that from the abomination of desolation until the resurrection would be about 2.5 years. You would have to survive and preach the gospel and love your neighbor for 2.5 years before the return of Jesus. We still don't know the day Jesus returns. We don't know that specifically, but we would have a time and a season, and we'd know about when that would happen. But the only thing we're watching for is this abomination. That's how I think that it fits in. Um, and you can go back and look at some of my more in-depth videos for that. Then the last question that I want to address today is why so much is going on between Revelation 11 and 15. Why do people have such a hard time with the book of Revelation? And I think it's because of what happens between Revelation 10 and Revelation 15, Revelation 11 and 15. There's a lot of different things that are talked about. There's this dragon, there's signs in the heavens, there's Israel being persecuted and going into the wilderness. You have the beast empire that's reigning for 42 months. You have the 144,000 that then appear in heaven. You have all of these different things going on that get time frames. They get time frames of event. So if this structure is correct, what we would see is we would see this order. If we see that the beast empire in Revelation 13, the reason that these things are happening and why God is giving that information in that time period is because Jesus has returned. The kingdoms of this world have now become the kingdoms of the Messiah and the Christ, right? Which means that the beast empire that had authority for 42 months, it's talking about it, but it came to an end, right? It came to an end here because the authority of Jesus has come and the beast empire authority ends. The two witnesses in Revelation 11, we know that they prophesy for 42 months, but we also find out in that same verse that they get killed. They live, they're on the ground for 3.5 days, and then they're resurrected. But they prophesy for 42 months. Well, if they're killed here in Revelation 11, because they have to be killed after the beast, after Abaddon comes out of the abyss, right? Abaddon comes out of the abyss in Revelation, I think is it 5 or 6? It's either 5 or 6. So they have to be killed by the beast that comes out of there in 5 or 6. So they're killed after 5th or 6th trumpet. So they're basically killed right at the time or right before the 7th trumpet. I think I think they're killed before the 7th trumpet, and on the 7th trumpet they're resurrected. which is why they lay for 3.5 days. But they talk about the two witnesses, but that means that their time of prophesying, their time of preaching is the 42 months prior, which is why it's talked about in the seventh trumpet. So, or right before the seventh trumpet. And that's why the beast empire is talked about in Revelation 13 and their authority for 42 months. It's also why I didn't put this on this slide, but Israel, it tells us two things about Israel. One, they go into the wilderness for 1,260 days, but it also tells us that they will, it'll be for a time, times, and half a time, that they go out into the wilderness for times, time, and half a time. And if you watch my other series, I've said that I have that slide. Let me slide through there real quick. Boom, boom, boom. I made all these other fun slides. All right. So here's the seventh trumpet in this one. Jesus returns in green down here on the bottom, and the seventh trumpet. Then that times, and half a time, what I've argued is that that's a Moedim and a half. A Moedim is the feast of God, right? A full Moedim cycle, plural Moedim, is a year. That's Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, uh, Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, and Tabernacles, Sukkot. That's a full Moedim cycle. A half a Moedim would be either the spring feast or the fall feast. So when they go in for times, and a half time, it's for an appointed time, a Moedim and a half. That this time period at the seventh trumpet would be for a Moedim and a half, which would be, going all the way back here, Yom Teruah, Day of Atonement, right? So the Satan getting kicked out and getting chosen, another community getting chosen, and the Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, that marriage ceremony time period. Then a full year, which would then Jesus would be on earth. His cloud would be on earth. If you were Judah, if you were Israel, you would recognize a pillar of cloud as the cloud from the Exodus, right? Jesus is on earth. He's fighting the other empires, and he brings Israel into a new covenant with Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, whether he renews that, Pentecost, and then he brings them through another Day of Atonement and Tabernacles. And the reason why in the millennium Tabernacles is celebrated is because it's the celebration of bringing them into the millennium. That's why I think the end of the 1335 days is the blessing, is the beginning of the millennium, or the Tabernacles feast, because that's the blessing. Again, we can discuss it because it doesn't say that directly. But that would mean that this bowl time period would be a year. It'd be one Moedim cycle. This time period here, the days of the seventh trumpet, would be a half of a Moedim. Short time period, 15 days, right? That half of a Moedim would be 15-day time period. 22 days if you go to the end. But that's why there's so much going on between Revelation 10 and 15, because there's been a change in empires. There's been a change of what's going on. The powers of the powers of Christ, the kingdom of this world has become the kingdom of the Christ. And so you're seeing the end of the beast empire. And that's why when you see the bowls poured out, and he says, come, let me show you the judgment of the beast, the mystery Babylon, and things like that. That they're going to get judged after those bowls are then poured out. But that's why the beast empire is in Revelation 13, because its power has officially ended there. The rest of it is just the judgment, the wrath of God being poured out on those empires before they're finally judged. And we've talked about this last time. The wrath of God, if you go back through, um, the wrath of God are the bowls. And I actually went and did some more research on that. Um, Actually, you know what? I don't have this as a question, but I'm going to put this up here. Um, the wrath. Let me go and do this with the wrath real quick. I'm gonna go to my search. Oh, look, I have the wrath here already because I've been doing research on it. Let's see if that pops up. Yes. All right. So I'm gonna zoom that in. All right. Let's go down to the Revelation ones. Okay. Now, last time when we were doing this, I was reading Revelation 18, and I am going to change my face over here. No. Let's change it over to here. No. No. All right, we'll do this for now. I'll get rid of that. Revelation 11:18. When I was reading the wrath last time, I had something a little stumped me. It says, "And the nations were enraged, and your wrath came, and the time came for the dead to be judged." Right? So what stumped me was this word came. It sounds like it's in the past tense. And so I'm like, wait a second, that seems a little bit odd to me. Does that mean that the wrath came at the sixth seal, right? Because some people say that the wrath of God starts at the sixth seal. And if you go back to the sixth seal, you see that that's in Revelation 16, 6:16. Um, right here, you see that fall on us and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of the wrath has come, and who is able to stand? So, what that implies is at the sixth seal, the wrath has come. It's getting ready to happen. And so, therefore, the resurrection and the rapture takes place at the sixth seal because it's getting ready. The trumpets are part of the wrath. And so when I read Revelation 11:18 and saw, oh, the nations were enraged and your wrath has come, it makes it sound like it was past tense, like it had happened already and it had happened back at the sixth seal. And it had stumped me because of that. But what I went and I did more research on is this word wrath came and wrath has come. Well, the really interesting thing is if you go and you look at the Greek and you look at um, the verb form, and let me find that down here because again, I like to show things. I don't like people to just take my word for things. All right, the wrath, the wrath of the Lamb for that great day of their wrath has come. Okay, so in the Greek, this word erkomai has come, but this is the verb tense. So in chapter 11:18, the verb tense is aorist, active, indicative, third person, singular. So the aorist, active, indicative tense is the most important part. And so they translate it as um, has come in verse 16. In Revelation 6:17, right? I didn't prepare for this, so I'm doing it off the cuff. Forgive me. Revelation 6:17. For the great day of the wrath has come, who is able to stand? So this verb tense tells us it's coming in the future or it's getting ready to come at that moment. And the tense is aorist, active, indicative. Now, if we go to Revelation 11:18 and we look at the verb tense here, your wrath came, right? They put it in a past tense, but if you look at it's aorist, active, indicative. It's actually can be translated as has come the same way. So you either, to be consistent, you either need to translate Revelation 6:17, your wrath came, and you're in Revelation 11:18, your wrath came, or you need to translate both of them for your wrath has come in 6:17, and in Revelation 11:18, your wrath has come. Both of them should be translated the same way because they're the same verb of Greek verb tenses. They're both third person, singular. They should be translated the same way. Why do the different translations in Revelation 11 put it as 18 as has came or as came past tense? I think the reason is is because they want to indicate that the sixth seal is where the wrath started. But I think what they're really showing is that the wrath is coming. The sixth seal indicates that it's going to happen, right? He breaks the sixth seal. It's coming. The wrath has come. There's no more waiting. You cannot put this off. It is clear to people. And when Jesus comes down, your wrath has come. It's here. There's no more waiting. It's coming. And why do we know that? Because if we look over in the other places, Revelation 14 and 15 tells us even more clearly. Look, he will also drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed full strength in the cup of his anger. There's this picture here of wrath being poured out. It's in a cup, it's in a bowl, it's something that they must drink. They have to drink it. There is no choice for them. They will drink the wrath of God. And the bowls are the wrath of God. The trumpets are not the wrath of God. The bowls are. They're telling you at the end of the seals, it has come. And when Jesus comes down, it has come because it's certain. When God says something's going to happen and when he indicates it, it's certain. But now this is the actual wrath. And it tells us, look, Revelation 14:19. Look, and he threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. So in 15:1, we find, because in them the wrath of God is finished. What is in them? What? In the bowls, the great marvelous seven angels who had the seven plagues, which are the last, because them in the wrath of God is finished. Excuse me. So that will be the wrath of God is finished. But we find even more. We find that in 15:7, the golden bowls full of the wrath of God. Go out and pour in 16:1. Go out and pour on the earth the seven bowls of the wrath of God. So the bowls are telling us that this is specifically the wrath of God. 16:19. Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. The cup, the bowls, these are the wine. These are what they must drink that are the wrath of God. These are what the nations have to drink. The other ones are just announcing that the wrath has come. The wrath is certainly going to happen because the seal has been broken. The trumpet has been announced. Jesus has descended, and now the wrath has come. So Christians are not appointed to wrath. That's why when Jesus returns, there's a resurrection and the rapture then, before the bowls, but not after, um, but not after the bowls, right? So there's different times people want to put pre-trib, right? The Christians are taken out here, that the seals are the wrath of God. The seals are not the wrath of God. The sixth seal is not the wrath of God. It's the announcement. It's the authorization for these events to happen. That's what breaking the seals are. It's the authorization for these events to happen. The trumpets are the announcement of the angels of Jesus's return. Is the announcement, and the seventh trumpet is the announcement of the greatest angel, the angel of the Lord, the host of heaven, who's coming down to the earth. And the bowls are the wrath of God that are being poured out. Remember in Daniel, 9:27, where we started all of this, that is poured out on the desolator until the end when it's poured out on the desolator. This idea of bowls being poured out, the cup being poured out in wrath. So I think that this is an overall structure of the order of events. Now we can go in and fill in even more specific, but I think that for the most part, this is what we really need to understand this order of events. And if we have this order of events, then we know what we're watching for. We know what we're looking for. Um, and we just keep watching and we keep waiting. Where are we on this timeline? Where are we on this order of events? Not completely clear. Maybe the first seal is opened. I don't think the covenant has been made, but there's some things that make me suspicious that the first seal has been opened. But I need to do more research on that. I'm still watching, but I'm suspicious. I'm suspicious of some things. What do we look again? I could talk for hours. It's only been an hour and a half. It's not been the 8 hours like last time, so I have plenty of time. I know. Don't laugh at me, because that's just how I roll. Revelation 6, the first seal. So the two earliest things that we can be looking for are the first seal and the covenant. Those are the two earliest things that we can look for. Look, when I saw the Lamb broke one of the seven seals, I heard one of the four living creatures say, with a loud voice of thunder, say, "Come." Okay. I looked, behold, a white horse. A white horse. And he who sat on it had a bow. That is a taxon bow. That is the one that they use for war. It's different than the bow of the cloud in Revelation 10. A crown was given to him. So a crown was given. And he went out conquering to conquer. What does that mean? Is that war? Is he trying to conquer? He has a white horse. Is he trying to conquer with peace? Jesus has a white horse and he's coming to fight battles. Does it mean that he's trying to conquer through peace? Well, let me help. Let me actually add that to the stage. That might be helpful. There we go. Come, the white horse. What does that mean? Does it mean he's trying to fight a battle? Well, the second seal is definitely war, right? He's given chance take peace from the earth. Does this mean that he was trying to conquer the world through peace? It's not clear, right? Is there anywhere in the Old Testament that really talks about this? Not really. I mean, there's Zechariah that talks about the horses, but there's not really anything that talks about it. It's really speculative. And we have to be really careful not to speculate beyond what the Bible gives. That's when we get into trouble. The first seal is equivalent to Matthew 4:14, right? There's going to be wars and rumors of wars and false Christs and plagues and famines. We keep our eyes open. Maybe, but we don't know. Covenant? Maybe, but we don't know. Nothing clear. Is the covenant going to be so the temple can be rebuilt? We don't know. Doesn't say. So keep our eyes open. We keep watching. But what we do have is we do have an order of events. That's what we need to be aware of. We need to be aware of the order of events. Keep our eyes open and watching. So any comments or thoughts of anybody who are out there? Any questions? I've done a lot of talking. Hopefully everyone's been listening. If you come on later, again, I'm going to be breaking these up, and I'm going to break these up to the small sections based on the questions. But you can put comments below if you're watching this later, of course. All right, I'm going to give it another minute and see if anybody has any questions, and if not, then I'll end the stream. One of these days, I've thought about possibly doing a whole revelation study where I actually go into the Old Testament and relate those. Like, we talked about the white horse, we'd go back into Zechariah. And, I've already kind of done it a little bit with Jesus in Revelation 10. I think that's just a phenomenal series. I didn't even touch on everything. There's still other things that I can still touch on to prove that that's Jesus. Okay. Well, it looks like no one has any questions. I was clear, convincing. I don't know. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody who's tuned in. Um, I hope everyone is blessed. Um, and prepare. Just prepare your heart to love like Jesus loves. It's tough. I was working last night, and boy, I realized how far I have to go to love people. I have a long way to go to really love people. All right. Take care. Peace. Shalom. Shalom.